So it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon at Whiskey Hill Farms and to really celebrate the exciting work that the Blume team is working on right here in the heart of Watsonville, where I have had the honor of being the city manager for the last 3 years. So you may not know that the city of Watsonville has been known for its environmental stewardship for many years, and everywhere from really championing water recycling efforts that we pump out billions of gallons every year to all of our agricultural industry, to also being one of the first agencies in Santa Cruz County to move forward with commercial organics recycling as well. And we've got a really dedicated team of spirited staff that take it very personal, the responsibility we have to all the environmental stewards in this beautiful Monterey Bay that we have the privilege of living in. So when I had the opportunity to sit down with Tom, Harvey, and JR and the Blume team a couple of months ago, and they came in with this radical idea of having our garbage trucks and even school buses running on Martinelli apple cider mash, I started picturing Tom as Doc Brown in Back to the Future, shoving a banana peel into the DeLorean and heading out of town. And the more I've had the opportunity to learn about what they're proposing, the more excited I got, right? So we live here in the Salad Bowl of California. We're one of the largest agricultural producers in the country. And with that, we've got a lot of organic waste that tends to just go into the landfill when everything's said and done. And in the meantime, we've got a fleet of school buses with Paro Valley Unified School District and garbage trucks and police vehicles that are driving around town burning fossil fuels, right? And when we look at what is really, in my opinion, one of the largest challenges of our generation, it's climate change. And we're seeing the effects of that throughout California, and certainly that's true here in Watsonville as well. And it's going to take really creative, big thinking changes to disrupt the system we have now when we look at the energy sector. And what Blume has come up with around taking plant-based organics and converting that into energy that we could potentially have our garbage trucks running off of, and have our school children heading to school powered by plant-based fuels. It's really exciting to see the possibilities that has, not just here in Watsonville, but throughout the country. So we wanted to be a part of that, and we are partnering with Blume and have committed to testing the alcohol fuel on a number of our garbage trucks over the next few months. And I know that you're going to be hearing from Dr. Michelle Rodriguez with the school district here shortly. They're going to be doing something similar with their school buses, and we want to be a part of that. It aligns with our mission here in Watsonville. We see the vision, and we're excited to be a part of that. And it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon with you all. So I don't know if the next step is going to be working on time travel, or if you're working on the DeLorean or not. But we want to be a part of it. So thanks for your time.
Dr. Michelle Rodriguez, we've had the pleasure of working with she and her motor pool team. We've actually tried a fuel bus trial, and maybe Michelle will share with you what inspired her to think, gosh, that might be worth looking at or experimenting with. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. So I think I was just interviewing in the back there on the radio, and really for us it's twofold. And you know, we are an educational institution, and one of the things that I think is unique about PBUSD, and we actually have some national notoriety for it, is our environmental literacy work that we do. So we actually have a curriculum that's starting at kinder all the way up to high school. We have our students learning about being good stewards of the environment. And I think so part of what we want to do is really model to our students possibilities and how we can actually purposely and intentionally take a resource that is right here in our backyard and actually help to improve the environment instead of using diesel. Now because of legislation, we don't have a choice but to eventually convert all of our buses. So the second piece is really looking at how can we be front runners along with Blume of looking at what school districts can do, because currently, and it was mentioned the work on the electric, but currently all of the grants that we have the opportunity to receive are around electric buses. So we did just recently receive a very large grant. So we are gonna be able to purchase several new buses. We have, some of you may not know, but we have the largest fleet of buses in all of Central Coast. So we have almost 100 buses. If you go to our bus yard, we have 100 buses that's there that transports about 8,000 students in total a day. And so we have students that in some cases are on a bus over 45 minutes. And so that's a long time to be polluting in the air, right? And so we're starting right now with a very small fleet so that we can look at conversions, we can look at what we can do. You know, each bus costs us almost $1 million, so we have to be cautious on not doing damage to them. So we're starting out with some of our older fleet, but eventually the goal is to convert more of the buses so that we can, one, model good behavior, model good stewardship, and then eventually, hopefully two, it will wind up having not only a positive impact on the health of our students, but also a positive impact on the fiscal as well.
Thank you, Tom. When I first met Tom and Dave, I was blown away by their excitement for the project and what they do. And as a banker who talks to a lot of local businesses, one of the things that always strikes me when I first meet someone is how passionate are they about what they do? Are they excited about what they do? Because those are the businesses and the people that are the most successful and the people that make things happen. And thank you. And so when I first met them, I had an opportunity to come out here and I saw what they're doing out here at Whiskey Hill. And I'm not going to lie to you, as a banker, most of the science of what they were telling me, it was way over my head. But I could see that what they were doing was making an impact, and what they were putting together was something special. What struck me being out here that day, in addition to that, was that their core values are really aligned with our bank's core values in terms of what we're looking to do in the community and what they're looking to do. What I mean by that is all of our branches are green certified. We finance a ton of clean energy projects, and this is a clean energy project in our backyard. We're all local bankers. We all live in this community, and so it's an exciting project for us to be a part of. And so we're just excited to see it coming along, and happy to be a partner with these guys. So it's a lot of what Matt was saying. If you can turn essentially trash into energy, that's a pretty cool concept. And most of the stuff that I look at on a daily basis is, well, we want to finance this apartment building, or we want to finance, building, a new commercial real estate, or doing some kind of. This is something different. It's something you don't see every day. And so for us, and as a banker, it was exciting. I wanted to know as much as I could about it, and kind of get a feel for what they're doing. So that was exciting for us. So we look at, there's a couple feasibility study of the whole thing. We look at, okay, does it make sense for the community? And we look at the numbers of it. So what are they doing, and how is that economically feasible as far as what we can see? And for us, it made sense in that respect. So, and just like any banker, we'll give you an umbrella on a sunny day. So,
Well, yes, bankers will give you an umbrella on a sunny day, but they also are guys who wear belts and suspenders, okay? That's what a banker is. So it's got to be safe, and we can, maybe Tom, you can turn me down a little bit. The thing about what's amazing about our relationship with the bank is I've never heard of a banker call a business and say, we want to lend you money. And that was an amazing day in our lives here at Whiskey Hill, is that we didn't have to go pursue the bank pursued us. And that was after we made a presentation over in Salinas about using medical grade alcohol for extraction of the medicines from the new CBD business and all that kind of thing in the area, because it's a new frontier in medicine, and it's a new market for extraction of those raw materials. Now, all medicines are kind of made this way. If you take a bunch of willow branches and chop them up and throw them in a bucket with alcohol and swoosh it around a little, and then scoop out the willows, evaporate the alcohol, the powder that's left in the bottom is called aspirin. And so that's how half the drugs nowadays are made, in using pharmaceutical alcohol. So it was natural for us to be looking at this new market and seeing if we can get in and supply some of the things that that market requires. But what really amazed us is how supportive the bank has been in the process. I wouldn't be disclosing anything inappropriate to say this bank is coming through with 85% of the financing for the upcoming plant, and that investors are only having to come up with 15. But as a banker, what does the banker need to know? He needs to know, do you have the stuff sold if you're going to be producing it? Do you have the raw materials to make the fuel? You know, so those things all had to be satisfied, which made all of us as business people have to do our best to be reassuring, not just to the investors, but to the bank, that this is a good loan. And so I think we're all really excited to see this happening, because this is the first of many plants that we want to put in California, because as we're all blessed to know, California is an agricultural state in a big way. And although alcohol was the first auto fuel before gasoline was ever invented, the first alcohol that was made in the United States was made from apples. Johnny Appleseed was a real fella, and he sold apple orchards, little shoots, to settlers, and he'd go out there. He's kind of like some of these, you know, dreadlocked Santa Cruz guys, you know, who are all into permaculture, and he'd go out in front of where the people were settling. He'd plant a bunch of apple branches in the bottom of a creek, and then all root. And then when people started settling the land, he'd go out there and pull them up and sell them their apple orchard. And people used alcohol for lighting. The so-called, you know, kerosene lamps were actually alcohol lamps originally. They used it for disinfecting. They used it, you know, for making extracts for medicine. They used it for washing and all kinds of other stuff. Alcohol is just an endlessly useful chemical, and we've known about it for a long time. I mean, after all, making alcohol is probably mankind's second oldest profession. Some would say the first, because Adam was a kind of rough-looking guy, and Eve needed something to drink before she'd go on with him. But basically, being in the developing world, alcohol is really important, as you're going to learn on the tour. And here we are in Santa Cruz County, which is one of the cleanest counties in the Bay Area. We don't even have to follow all the smog rules that cities on the other side of the hill have to do, because our air is so clean, and the cleaner we can keep it, the happier we are. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the tour coming up, which is we're going to do it in two halves. So I will be out in the greenhouses doing kind of the farming half and the byproducts of alcohol half, because as you'll see, this place is about a lot more than just making alcohol, because when you make alcohol, then there's things left over. And at Blume, when there's some so-called waste product, which we don't know how to spell waste here, we only see profit. Oh, how do you make money from that? You know, and that methodology of never wasting anything is the way we should be doing business nowadays. And you're going to see what we do here, which is kind of exciting. And again, Michelle, of course, we can make our facility available from time to time for teachers who want to take a look at some of this with their students, depending on the needs of the class and that kind of thing, because it's pretty exciting here. And you know, you've seen it already.
Okay, so when we produce here some alcohol, we've got to start with our feedstocks here. So that's what we're going to talk about first. With feedstock, we got two categories that we're going to put them in. It's either already a simple sugar, like beet molasses or sugar cane, or it's a complex carbohydrate, which is pretty much everything else out there. Simple sugars are easy to deal with. Every organism on the planet wants to eat sugar. In our case, we only want the yeast to eat sugar. So, when we have a product that is like the beet molasses, or another example would be candy waste, manufacturers of candy always have broken pieces, stuff that doesn't make it to packaging, all sorts of different things. So this is an easy one to turn into alcohol. What we need to do is cook our batch. So for a simple sugar batch, we've got one tank in here. This one behind you is for liquid or simple sugar feedstocks. When we cook it, we use direct steam injection. That's our boiler right there. So we'll use steam injected into the liquid and allow it to boil to kill off any living organisms that might eat the sugar, since we only want our yeast to do it. Now when we have a different type of feedstock, like a carbohydrate, this is almond hulls. So if you're not familiar, this is what the exterior of the almond looks like after it's sent to market. So you've got hull, shell, and then nut. We only ever see the shell or the nut when we buy them. But these little guys still have 35% sugar in them. And there are tons of these out in the middle of the Central Valley. So this would be an example of a good complex carbohydrate to turn into alcohol. And when we do that, we gotta allow enzymes to do their job. When we eat a carbohydrate, our body has enzymes already. Those enzymes break down that carbohydrate into sugar, and then our cells can convert that into energy.
Fat.
I'm sorry?
It converts it into fat.
Energy.
Just kidding. Yeah.
Energy.
Stored as fat.
Sometimes. So we need to do the same thing. We have a cook tank, another one on the back behind the building here, and the biggest difference between that one and the one inside is the one outside has a very large agitator. Sometimes we're going to be dealing with thick stuff, so it helps to have the agitator. So we broke down the almond hull into smaller particles. This creates more surface area, easier access for the enzymes to do their job of breaking down the carbohydrate. So we can add this with some water to the tank, control the temperature, control the pH, and add the enzymes that will break those carbohydrates into simple sugars. And we do this with pretty much everything else, even the fruit, which you'll notice here we've got a couple of different bottles of alcohol made from fruit, blackberry, strawberry, blueberry, and apple. Fruit has carbohydrates in it. It's not just sugar. So there's even more sugar that we can get at with the enzymes. And since we're making fuel out of this feedstock, we want to be as efficient as possible. We want to get every drop of sugar out of every piece of the feedstock. So things like the fruit would go into there with some enzymes to help break it down further. The only thing that would ever go into the one tank here is if it's already a simple sugar. Nothing else to break it down into.
So step one is to break the complex carbohydrate into enzyme to a simple sugar. So all of them eventually get to that.
Yep.
And then the rest of the process.
Correct. So once everything's at simple sugar, we boil it to kill off any other living organisms, including the enzymes. And then we can cool it down and put it into one of our fermenters here. Now the yeast that we use for fuel alcohol has a high tolerance for alcohol. It's around 20%. Most yeasts don't have that type of tolerance. They're a little bit lower because they're most of the time being made into either beer or wine or even some of the distilled beverages, which are still grain. Those yeasts don't tolerate 20% environments. So this allows us to be pretty efficient in our tanks. We can make a batch upwards of 15 to 18%. I'm going to shut this door here. Now we want to do that because if the environment gets past 20% and there's still sugar in there, the yeast will die. Just like we would if we consume too much alcohol. Same thing happens in the tank. If that tank gets past 20% alcohol, the yeast could die and any leftover sugar would be wasted. So we want to keep it between 15 and 18%. Once the batch is in there, we add the yeast. Now the yeast will consume the sugar and they will convert the sugar into equal parts, by weight, alcohol and carbon dioxide. So what I mean by weight, 1 pound of alcohol is going to also be 1 pound of carbon dioxide. So that's a lot of carbon dioxide that we can make, but this is extremely clean carbon dioxide. It's not created like most of the bulk carbon dioxide, which is from fracking or the oil industry. This is made by natural living organisms. So it'd be like if we just sat there and exhaled in a tube and collected it all. It's pretty clean CO2. But we collect it all here. So you'll notice there's some plumbing across the top of the fermenters. So that way, as the CO2 escapes, we can capture it. And from here, it goes into a holding tank, and then that tank gets compressed to a storage tank. So we can store compressed CO2, and here on the farm, we just deliver it into the greenhouse for the plants, which I believe they demoed down in 7. Yes? Good. The yeast will take about 3 days to ferment one of these batches in these tanks here. If you were making a beverage, that could take anywhere from a week to a month to ferment. Because you want it's a totally different kind of control you're doing there. You want to make a good flavored item. Here we're only about efficiency because we're making fuel. So 3 days to get the batch done, which is pretty nice. This means we can move pretty quickly. Once the yeast have finished their job, now all we need left to do is separate the alcohol from whatever else is in there, which is mostly water. And that's where distillation comes into play. So distillation is the process of using heat energy to separate two liquids of different boiling points. In our case, water is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Alcohol is 172 degrees Fahrenheit. So we got about 40 degrees of gap, which makes it very easy then to separate. So we hook up our tank. Our system here can run continuously. So as long as we're going to use the word beer, in the tanks, the distillation system can just keep on running. So the first thing we do is we deliver the beer to our first column here. This one is called the stripper. The beer is injected at the top and steam is injected at the bottom. What we need to do now is turn our liquid into vapor, because that's the only way to separate the two. We want them to both be in a vapor form. So as the beer comes in, it gets heated up to the boiling point. And this column on its own will produce 100 proof alcohol. 100 proof alcohol is 50% alcohol and 50% water. Everything else, all the extra water, all the dead yeast, all the nutrients, vitamins, minerals that were in the batch will get to the bottom of this, all the solids as well. And from there we can send it to a holding tank, which I believe then we showed you from there, it goes to the methane digester. And we can create our own methane. Use that methane, bring it right back up, run the boiler or run any other equipment that could run on natural gas, which is quite a bit at the plant. The 100 proof vapor then will travel to the next column. Now the next column here is pretty similar distillation column to what I have over here. This is a small lab setup, but this is a batch still, but it shows you what's going on inside the big column there. The liquid is boiling at the bottom. As it boils, it turns into vapor. The vapor begins to travel up this column, but the column is full of packing material. The packing material is actually pretty benign. It can be made of anything as long as it can handle the temperature. In this case, this is little glass tubes, but all that they do is create surface area. So as the vapor travels up, it touches the surface and turns back into liquid. And this happens over and over again as it travels up the column. And we control the temperature at the top. So down at the bottom it's 212 degrees, but near the top it's around 170 degrees. So that way when the vapor gets to this point, the only vapor that can come past is alcohol. Because at 170 degrees we should have liquid water. The liquid water would fall back down. The alcohol vapor would continue to rise up into the condensing unit. This is just a tube inside of with water that helps cool the alcohol vapor, turns it back into a liquid, and then it drips and we're able to collect it. Same thing is going on inside the big column. Now our system here, we run it to produce 170 proof alcohol. That's going to leave us with 15% water. The reason for it is, when you use distillation to separate alcohol and water, the best you can achieve is 192 proof with just heat. But to get from 170 to 192, it uses 10/11ths of the total energy of the system. So we knock that out because, well, that's a lot of energy, 10/11ths worth. We go to 170, and the way we're able to do that is the last two columns here. The 170 proof vapor will travel inside to this column. These columns are called absorbers. They only have an affinity for water. The material inside only likes water, so the water vapor travels in, it sticks, and only the alcohol vapor can escape. And from there we can collect it and it'll be 200 proof alcohol. These are also regenerative, so once a column has filled with water, we only have to drive it off using hot air. Just past the boiling point of water, that'll drive the water off, and that can be collected. It's clean water, it's been distilled. We bring it back into the plant for the next batch, or use it for irrigation. So that way nothing gets wasted. Any questions about distilling? No? All right, let me show you a few other things in the way we had over here. So alcohol has been around forever, right? Pretty much. First person that figured it out. But we have some fun things that we like to show that how old of an industry it was. This runs on alcohol. This was made in 1912. Yes, it is an iron. You filled the little chamber with alcohol. You lit it, had a little flame in here, and you'd iron your clothes. 1912 didn't really have electricity, right? So had to figure out a way to make nice pressed clothes. This was a pretty easy at home. So this was manufactured by Coleman. So one of the other items here, this stove, this is actually pretty used a lot in the marine industry here, but this is part of another project that we've been working on as an advantage for a lot of countries that still have people burning wood, dung, or coal to cook their meals, which happens, statistic-wise, what was the number again? 4 million deaths a year just from cooking.
We met these
because of the fumes they're breathing. So the advantage of these, pretty easy. These cartridges actually fit into the bottom part of the stove here, and these cartridges could be filled at the alcohol plant and then delivered to the home. Just like the milkman used to deliver milk and pick up the empty bottles, bring you the full ones. This works very similar, so you can see this is some nice pure alcohol. I spilled a little on the side, unfortunately. But it doesn't come back out. So these could be sealed, delivered, and then one cartridge could cook 3 meals. Pretty easily. That would save probably close to 4 million lives if we could get everybody to convert to it. But this could be part of the program with the alcohol plant in that community. They could be supplying the alcohol to these families. We could supply the stoves as well at a very low cost, because obviously something like that might not be in their budget. But then these could be distributed by whatever current delivery system they have for other things, and to generate clean cooking. Exactly. And they could be refilled at the plant in areas where alcohol is frowned upon. There's no way to get the alcohol out of here. The only thing you can do is burn it in the stove. So now we'll do a little demo here on why burning alcohol over gas is beneficial. So what I've done is put a little bit of gasoline, just regular unleaded gasoline, and some of our 200 proof alcohol here. So we will light the alcohol, and you're going to see there's a very light colored flame, not much going on, mostly blue. And then we'll light the gasoline. So immediately you'll see the gasoline is an orange flame and a lot of smoke coming off of it. Those two things tell us that there's a whole bunch in there that's not burning. A whole bunch of stuff that doesn't burn. So that's waste. That's harmful to us. It's harmful to the engine that it's in. This is why you'll see now the glass containers start to get a lot of black on it. Same thing's happening in your engine. The alcohol one stays clean because it burns completely. It is using all of its energy and converting it into heat. So yeah, unfortunately that's what we get there of burning a waste product to run cars, is more waste products into the air that we get to breathe and consume in some other way.
So what this little thing here is a small version of this big bag behind us. This is a bag full of water. You can hear it as I hit it. And this is a methane digester. It makes natural gas from plant material. So I take my kitchen scraps. I thought I had a bucket out here, but I'll just give you the idea of it. So there's like a big funnel here, and I can put in all my kitchen scraps and push them in underwater. And underwater, of course, there's no air. So there's a bacteria that's in there that came from horse manure originally, and it eats up all the kitchen scraps, and it gives off a gas, which is natural gas. So let me bleed the air out of the line here. I'll turn it on for a second. So what's on top here are sandbags, and they push down on the bag, and therefore the gas that's bubbling up from the water, and that pushes the gas over here. So when I turn it on, I have heat. My kitchen scraps put in here, like a 3-person household putting in kitchen scraps, will make 3 hours of cooking a day. And as you can see, it's very clean, just a little light blue flame. Alcohol is a great cooking fuel, but homemade natural gas is just about as good. But we use the big bag to make so much natural gas that we can run our boiler and run our alcohol plant. So here we are, taking the waste left over from making alcohol to make the energy to process all of our mash into final distilled spirits, and we didn't buy anything from PG&E. And that's really a good day when you don't buy something from PG&E. So natural gas, making it ourselves, use it to run our plant, and it works great. Now, after this stuff is finished gobbling up all that, there's this sewage left over, right? This is like the first stage of making sewage. So when it's done and you put more in, well, that means something has to come out. And so the liquid coming out from this end goes into our marsh here. And this is a cattail marsh. The nutrients that come out are really great fertilizer. You can use it for any crop, but too much of a good thing is a definition of pollution, right? So thank you, Tom. I'm sorry I didn't put that in first. Okay, good. This might make it easier to hear me and keep my throat from getting too good. Does that work? Oh, it sounds good. So here we are with the cattail marsh. Now we've cut back a little bit because we've harvested some of the greens, because we can get something out of that too. Because remember, we don't waste anything. So all these nutrients that were here that go in there, well, they grow cattails. Now cattails have 2 main parts. There's the greenery on top, but there's this big honking horizontal root structure that grows underneath, and you can see it keeps coming up everywhere. And that root structure is where it stores all its food. And that food is mostly starch. Starch, it's a carbohydrate. You can make what out of starch? Alcohol, right? There's a theme here, right? So if we process sewage, or let's say if we're making cow poop into methane, and then that liquid can go into a marsh. So marshes are really useful, so it makes starch from the air. So when I say from the air, what I mean is that starch comes from carbon dioxide in the air. Carbo is the carbo of carbohydrates, so carbon dioxide. Hydrate is water. So water and carbon dioxide, solar energy glues them together and makes them into starch. So it's truly a solar material, and we ferment that and make alcohol. So these cattails are taking that carbon dioxide, mixing it with water. As you can see, it grows in a swamp, and all the nutrients we give it make that happen. Now, there's more going on here. See, when we take the greens off like we did, we can juice those, and then we can add alcohol to the juice. And when we do that, the protein in the juice drops out into little pellets, and that can be fed to people, or it can be fed to animals. That's leaf protein concentrate. So we can get 15 tons per acre of protein from cattails. Is that a lot? Well, corn will only give you 2 tons of protein per acre. So it's quite a lot. And the starch, we get 7,500 gallons of alcohol per acre per year. Is that a lot? Well, corn will only give you 300 gallons of alcohol per acre per year, less than 1/20th as much, and you have to have really good farmland to do it. We can do this obviously anywhere where we can have a pond and water to do it. So we get our sewage processed, our plant sewage processed, we get more starch from sunlight and solar energy, and we get protein which can feed everybody in the world. That protein is human and animal suitable. And it's plant protein, which is what we're all talking about, is plant-based diet. Now, as we move on from here, we'll see that after we've processed this very nutrient-rich material through the marsh, which it goes that direction, it takes the nitrates down from 30,000 units to 5 units. Nitrates are a main issue of water pollution. Look at how much it can clean it from 30,000 down to 5. The EPA limit is 10. So if you discharge the stuff from the other end of this marsh into a river or the ocean, it's perfectly legal because it's as clean as what you'd see coming out of a national park. So let's go on down here.
On those units, what's like the scientific?
The compost pile has all these tubes in it, all right? They go from one end of the pile to the other, and when we turn this pump on, the water goes through the tubes in the pile. The pile is hot from composting, and the water comes out into this tube at 120 degrees. So then we pump that hot water that way, and I'll show you what we do with it down there. So we get PG&E free hot water that we made by composting. Now, compost, remember I said the little bugs need air? So the way that's normally done is you have to pick up the compost every few days and then make another pile, and all the carbon dioxide drifts away and there's new air in it, but that sounds like a lot of extra work to me. And being the good Amish farmer that I've been accused of being, I don't do extra work. I don't have any problem with work, but not extra work. So what I do to turn the pile is I throw this valve, and that's compressed air going through tubes in the pile and spraying compressed air through the pile, and it drives out all the CO2 and fills the pile with air, oxygen again, and it goes right back to work. Oh, and now we have tea over there from the methane making steam. So instead of having to go out there and do a day's work with a tractor, I turn this on once or twice or 3 times a day, and in a week the compost is made because the bacteria have all the air they need to breathe. So that's, you know, just using the old noggin to make less work.
Is that just atmosphere? Or
No, we have a compressor up there.
But is it atmospheric?
Yeah, it's just compressed air.
It's just gas.
Yes.
From same stuff as we're breathing. You don't pump actual oxygen in.
No, I'm just using compressed air. And if the compressor's running on alcohol, well then I'm not buying anything from PG&E either, am I? So we put our compressed air in there, and it saves us lots of work and energy. So if you listen, hear that? That's a frog. Frogs are important, I'll show you that in a minute. But this is a fish pond, okay? So after the nutrients are pretty well cleaned up at that end, they go into this pond, and you can see all the stuff growing on top. That's duckweed. And this pond is loaded with bluegill and catfish, and they eat the duckweed. But duckweed, you know, duckweed's a plant, so plants breathe in carbon dioxide, and they bubble out oxygen. So the duckweed is putting oxygen into the water, which the fish need to breathe. And of course, the fish need to eat something, so they eat the duckweed. So duckweed reproduces really fast and stays ahead of the fish. I don't have to buy fish food, and I don't have to use energy to put oxygen. I don't have to bubble oxygen in the water like you do at your home aquarium to keep the fish alive. So the 2 big costs in raising fish are oxygen and food. And so I don't have those costs because I let nature do it. So I've taken the waste from the alcohol plant, I made methane with it, and then I went ahead and cleaned up the excess nutrients with the cattail marsh, used the remaining nutrients to grow algae, and now the fish eat the algae. Now the next step for us is we're about to start growing freshwater lobster. Now freshwater lobster is actually a big crayfish, and they come from Australia originally. And of course, we're growing it indoors, so there's no Fukushima radiation like there is in the ocean. There's no mercury from all Chinese coal plants and all the mercury dropping into the ocean, ending up in the food. So this will be the cleanest lobster you can get your hands on. Now, here's the thing. If you don't make money when you're doing it, no one will pay attention to you. So, it doesn't matter how good the thing is. So up there at the alcohol plant, which you'll see in the second half of the tour, for every gallon of alcohol we make up there, by the time we go through this whole process and we have lobster here, we'll make $40 worth of lobster for every gallon of alcohol we make. So are we in the lobster business or the alcohol business? It's a little hard to say on the given day, but we're in both businesses because we don't waste anything. So let's go over this way. In a capsule, if you take 6 of those capsules over a week, if you have like my friend Miles, his kid had a broken foot, in 6 doses, he was able to start running again in 2 weeks. So it's a form from nature of super absorbable calcium that can help you repair bones. It sells for $1,000 an ounce. So you only get a couple of grams of this special calcium in this little deposit inside the lobster, but you clean that part of the lobster out with the guts when you go to sell it. So, well, I'm not going to let that go to waste. $1,000 an ounce? No, not a problem. So this is sugar cane. And sugar cane is a lot bigger than that sugar cane. And the reason is, you'll learn when you go up to the alcohol plant part of the tour, is that when we make alcohol, we get 2 things. We get alcohol and we get carbon dioxide. When the yeast eat the sugar, they make 2 things, alcohol and carbon dioxide. We take the carbon dioxide, and if we put it into the beds through the drip irrigation, and we put the carbon dioxide into the drip tape there, it has little holes in it. The carbon dioxide hisses out underneath the plants, and the plants breathe in the CO2, and when they get more CO2, they grow a lot taller than the plants next to them that don't have the CO2. So you can get 3 times the amount of food or flowers or whatever per square foot when you increase the amount of CO2 as a byproduct of making alcohol. The excess CO2, we can use it, and it displaces fossil fuel CO2 that comes from fracking. So how does that work in real life? Well, if you're a marijuana grower in the valley here, you're taxed by the square foot because the taxing agencies don't trust you to accurately report how much money you made. I mean, if you won't tell the IRS, why tell the local county and get taxed there? Or they won't believe you for how many pounds of whatever product you're making, but they know how many square foot are in your greenhouse, and so they'll tax you by the square foot. But if you're using CO2, you get 3 times as many flowers or 3 times as many pounds of whatever it is you're growing, so the effect of taxes on you is a lot less because you're getting 3 times the product in the same square foot because you use CO2. So CO2 from alcohol production is highly sought after. Martinelli's, the people who are giving us our apple pulp, are buying all our CO2 not to grow things, but Martinelli's apple cider is sparkling. It's carbonated, so they want our CO2, which is food grade, to carbonate their juice. So Martinelli's will be Blume carbonated when our plant is up and running, and that's one of the reasons why they're supporting the project, because they don't want to use fracking CO2 in their apple juice. Now, look at these blue tubes behind you here. Now, I said back there we had a pump that pumped the hot water from the pile. So where does the hot water go? Well, these blue tubes are 4 feet beneath the surface of the ground and go all the way out that side and come back up on the other side of the greenhouse. So when hot water goes through it and goes to the other side and the water comes out, it might go in at 120 degrees, But when it comes back up, it's only 70 degrees. No water went into the soil. It's just like a radiant floor. It radiantly heats the soil, and then the plants are able to be living in warm soil. Now, in the winter, when the temperature might go below freezing, these plants have roots that go down where that warm soil is, and all the irrigation water that's all down there is warmed also. So the plants pull warm water up into themselves, and they go, I don't care it's 25 degrees, I'm warm. I don't have to heat the glass, I don't have to heat the steel, I don't have to heat the air, just to heat my plants to keep them from getting frostbite, because they pump their own water up from underneath the ground that's been heated by our extra waste heat from alcohol production. So alcohol can be integrated into the whole agricultural scheme, and each step of the way it's a product that we can use. But I have one more cool thing to show you. Come this way. Why do we want frogs? Well, it turns out that frogs eat bugs. That's no surprise. But grad students have counted the number of bugs that frogs eat in a night, and they eat 167 bugs a night.
One frog.
One little frog this big.
Those little tree frogs? Or?
Yeah, little Pacific tree frog. And without grad students, we wouldn't know anything, right? Because who else would stay up all night counting frogs? So they eat all those bugs. Now, what they need to be here to attract them into here were three things. We have this pond. See, that's water. We have a pile of rocks, and we have a lantern. So here's how it works. You open the doors at night, you light the lantern. The light goes out there, and frogs see the light, and they go, there must be bugs there, because bugs go to the light. So the frogs come hopping over here from far away, and they get here, and they look around, and they go, oh my God, you know, jacuzzi, condominium, I'm moving in. So this is where they reproduce. Frogs have to reproduce in the water, and they live in the rocks during the day because, well, they're kind of soft and squishy, and everybody likes to eat them, so they hide. But at night, you heard the first ones coming out. You heard a little frog song out there. So the frogs come out of here and go out and eat bugs. How many bugs do they eat? Well, we know each one eats 167 on average. But when they reproduce, there are thousands and thousands of little tiny baby frogs that come hopping out of here, and they become big frogs by eating bugs. How many bugs? We know how many, but how much per acre? How many tons of frogs can we get? Well, it turns out that 20 tons of bugs move through every acre a year. I mean, bugs are a force of nature, basically. Doesn't matter what you do, 20 tons of bugs are going to visit your property. But look at all this basil here. We're an organic farm. We don't spray anything. Do you see any bug holes in any of that?
I don't see any gopher holes either.
That's also part of the rocks. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And look at all that. That's Thai ginger, and there's the sugar cane. You don't see any holes in anything. Look at all the turmeric. There's no holes in any of it, right? And that's passion fruit growing there, which is another story. But the idea is the bugs aren't eating anything, but 20 tons come through here. What that means is the frogs eat all the bugs. So they check in, but they don't check out. But they leave something behind. And all those frogs eating all those bugs poop out 20 tons of bug poop, which is high nitrogen, really good fertilizer, and I didn't have to spread it. The frogs deposit it for me all over the greenhouse. So no waste and no work. Those are two things in my formula that works. So here we are turning the problem, which is bugs. You know, it's not a problem, it's just a resource. We have a surplus of bugs, and we have a shortage of fertilizer. So by using nature, by using frogs, we're able to turn the surplus problem into a surplus of nutrients for our soil without spending any money or doing any work. And that's the smart way to farm instead of spraying everything into submission. So that's how we do things here. Now you asked about gophers, and you're right. You don't see any gopher holes here. And heck, those are root crops. You mean gophers ought to go nuts. But that pile of rocks has more in it than just frogs. It has snakes. And the snakes, when I have a standing reward for any employee that finds a snake, they bring it to me, they get $10. And that was needed because in Mexico, any snake you see, you're supposed to kill it. That's just the way it is. So I had to get them all used to the idea that $10 is better than killing a snake. And so they bring them to me, and I just walk over to the rocks with the snake, and I just kind of point it at the rocks, and the snake goes right on in, and they hide there, and they come out at night, and they go down the gopher holes, and they eat all the baby gophers. So I don't even have to trap the gophers. They turn into, they probably eat a few frogs, but you know, it's worth it. They get the gophers. That's what I care about. So if you don't fight with nature, you end up benefiting quite a few ways. And you can't fight with nature because if you piss off Mother Nature and throw her out the window, she comes back in the door with a pitchfork and you're in real trouble. So, we don't spray anything. We don't fight with Mother Nature. We just figure out how to make her happy and cooperate. It's really simple.
Work with her.
Yeah, and believe me, she's a great ally. So alcohol is part of that whole picture. We take the surplus, raw materials, we turn those into something that's scarce, which is energy and fuel. We don't need oil. We don't need the corporations that control that oil and tell us there is no other alternative. There are always alternatives, and they're usually something that we can do in our community and take control back. And so, on the way out, I want you to look at these red solar panels. You might have noticed them on the way in. Now, these panels we'll see on the way out. There's no light coming through those. Those are the standard solar panels, but these are different. So when you come up and look at these, you'll see that they're kind of red looking. And that's because when you look at green plants, what you're seeing when you look at a green plant is you're seeing the plant reflecting yellow and blue. Okay? In other words, when you see something, it's because that's what's being reflected. So plants clearly don't have much use for yellow and blue light. And so they're reflecting it away. And so these panels here grab the yellow and blue light and they send it over here to this panel and into the grid. So we don't even waste sunlight here. The stuff that the plants need to grow comes through just fine, but the stuff the plants don't need, we turn into electricity, and then we get to not pay PG&E. As you can tell, that's kind of a sport for me, is not paying PG&E. So this was invented at UC Santa Cruz, and we're working with the inventor to possibly put 20 acres of greenhouses in the property next door that we're buying with these kind of panels on it, and we'll make more than 1 megawatt of power with all these panels and put it into the grid, taking away, yet again, more profit from PG&E. So, it's a good hobby, not paying PG&E. I like it.
They were developed here at UCSC, right?
They were, yes. And we're working with the inventor, and they spun off a company, and they're putting this on greenhouses all over the world now. So, I've given you a taste of what we do here. We did this with very, very little money. And I think we accomplished a few things here that show what's possible. But nothing changes without actually doing business. And so our next step is to put up an alcohol plant, not like the little one in there, but a bigger one in Watsonville, where every contractor with a pickup truck and every school bus and all these vehicles can be running on something that big oil and PG&E doesn't make, right? And now Michelle got a grant to have electric buses, but we've already told her, don't worry, We'll put in a generator at the school bus yard, we'll run it on alcohol and charge your electric buses, so don't worry about that. You don't have to get that from PG&E either. So, you know, my point is that solutions are here. Things are not hopeless. We are pretty smart monkeys. We know how to fix things if we put our mind to it. Where, you know, stupidity is not mandatory. You know, we can choose to be intelligent about how we do things. And here we were with very little money, and we made some holes in the ground and marshes and energy and food and fish and all that. You know, I'm only copying what other people have done before me and kind of putting it together, but we can do this over and over and over again, connected with alcohol plants. And so, those of you who know investors, see, this is my job, I'm the CEO, I have to ask for money. So, if you know any investor types, we still need a little more investment in our first Watsonville alcohol plant project. You heard the bank is putting up 85% of the money. So those of you who know investors, have them contact me and we can give them the information and see if they think it's worth it. The alcohol plant without the agriculture, I don't even add the agriculture, that would just make people crazy. But without the agriculture, the alcohol plant alone will make 150% return on investment a year. So if somebody invests $60,000, they'll get back, well, let's make it simpler. Let's say it was $50,000, just to do the math easier. That means they would get $75,000 a year return on investment for putting up $50,000. That is better than PG&E, believe me. So anybody who knows investors, have them call me or Tom, and that's my message to you today. Working with nature is profitable.